The quiet invasion, the first sign that everything was about to change, came not with explosions or dramatic announcements, but with a gentle chime that echoed across every electronic device on Earth simultaneously. It was 3:47 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on a Tuesday when humanity heard its first words from beyond the stars. The doctor, Sarah Chun, was in her laboratory at the Smithsonian Institution analyzing rock samples from Mars when her computer screen flickered and displayed text in perfect English. The same message appeared on phones in Tokyo, television screens in Lagos, and radio broadcasts in remote Alaskan villages. The translation was flawless, appearing in every language simultaneously. Greetings, people of Earth. We are the Kethvar Collective. We have observed your world during its time of struggle and wish to offer assistance to your species in exchange for voluntary cooperation. Sarah stared at the message, her hands trembling as she reached for her phone to call her colleague at NASA. But before she could dial, the message continued, this time accompanied by images that appeared across every screen on the planet. The beings calling themselves Kethvar looked remarkably similar to humans, though taller and more slender, with pale blue skin and large, intelligent eyes. They stood in what appeared to be an advanced spacecraft, wearing flowing robes that seemed to shimmer with their own light. Their spokesperson, who introduced himself as Harvester Prime Zeflock, spoke with a voice that seemed designed to inspire trust and calm. Your world faces many challenges, the message continued. Climate disasters, resource depletion, social unrest. We have the technology to help solve these problems, but we require something from your people in return. We seek volunteers willing to travel to other worlds where their unique human qualities can serve a greater purpose in our galactic community. Captain Marcus Webb was in a strategy meeting at the Pentagon when every screen in the building displayed the alien message. A career military man with 23 years of service, Webb had seen enough political promises to be immediately suspicious of anyone offering easy solutions to complex problems. As other officials around him expressed wonder and hope, Webb was already thinking about defensive positions and communication protocols. Sir, he said to General Harrison, who was staring at the screen with obvious fascination, this feels like a recruitment pitch, and in my experience, anyone who has to ask for volunteers usually isn't offering something people actually want. But Webb's concerns were drowned out by the excitement sweeping across the globe. Within hours, the Kethvar had landed 3 massive ships at designated coordinates, one outside New York City, another near Geneva, and a third in a carefully chosen location in international waters. The ships were beautiful beyond description, looking like enormous crystals that seemed to capture and reflect light from sources that didn't exist. Elena Rodriguez, a community organizer from Los Angeles, watched the news coverage from her small apartment while her 2 children played nearby. At 34, Elena had spent years fighting for immigrant rights and fair labor practices, which had given her a keen sense for when powerful people were making promises that sounded too good to be true. Mommy, her 8-year-old daughter Carmen, asked, "Are the space people really going to help us?" Elena pulled Carmen close, watching as the news showed thousands of people gathering near the alien ships, many carrying signs welcoming the visitors. I don't know, Mija, but remember what I always tell you about strangers who offer you candy? The Kethvar didn't offer candy. They offered something much more appealing. Hope. Over the following weeks, their representatives met with world leaders demonstrating technology that could clean polluted air in minutes, grow crops in barren soil, and generate unlimited clean energy. They showed holographic displays of beautiful worlds where humans could live in harmony with advanced civilizations, contributing their creativity and adaptability to galactic society. Dr. Chin was among the first scientists granted access to study Kethvar technology. What she found was genuinely revolutionary. Their biological scanners could detect and cure diseases that human medicine hadn't even identified yet. Their environmental restoration tools could reverse decades of ecological damage in weeks, but there were things that bothered her. The Kethvar seemed strangely knowledgeable about human psychology and social structures, as if they had been studying Earth for much longer than they claimed. Their questions during interviews weren't just about technical skills or adaptability, but about family connections, social bonds, and what humans would miss most about Earth. Dr. Chun, Harvester Prime Zephlock, said during one of their meetings, "Your species is remarkable in its emotional complexity. Tell me, what drives humans to sacrifice for others outside their immediate genetic line?" It was an odd question for someone supposedly interested in humanity's contribution to galactic society. Sarah answered carefully, explaining human concepts of community, ethics, and altruism, but she filed the conversation away in her mind alongside other peculiar interactions. Captain Webb's suspicions deepened when he observed the security protocols around the alien ships. The Kethvar claimed they needed to process volunteers through medical examinations and cultural preparation before departure, but the facilities they established were designed more like processing centers than medical clinics. Volunteers entered through one area and were moved through a series of chambers that couldn't be observed from the outside. More troubling was the pattern of who was volunteering. The initial wave included many of Earth's brightest minds and most capable individuals, but as weeks passed, the Kethvar began accepting volunteers from increasingly desperate populations. Refugees from disaster zones, people facing economic hardship, individuals with few social connections to keep them on Earth. Elena noticed this pattern too. Representatives from the Kethvar had visited her neighborhood multiple times, specifically targeting communities where people felt forgotten by their own governments. They offered immediate solutions to problems that had persisted for generations, asking only for a few volunteers willing to start new lives among the stars. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Dr. Chun had been allowed to examine some of the equipment the Kethvar used for their cultural preparation of volunteers. While studying the device's energy signatures, she discovered it was transmitting data to the alien ships in a format she could partially decode using quantum communication principles. What she found in those transmissions made her blood run cold. The volunteers weren't being prepared for new lives in galactic society. They were being evaluated, categorized, and assigned numerical codes that corresponded to different types of labor: physical work, intellectual tasks, genetic diversity, and something chillingly labeled as compliance indicators. The Kethvar weren't offering humans a chance to join galactic civilization. They were sorting them for sale to the highest bidder, Dr. Chin immediately contacted Captain Webb through encrypted military channels. Webb had been quietly building a network of suspicious military and intelligence personnel, and Chen's evidence confirmed his worst fears. The Kethvar weren't saviors. They were the most sophisticated slave traders humanity had ever encountered. The two of them arranged to meet with Elena Rodriguez, whose community organizing experience had given her an extensive network of contacts across different social and economic groups. When they showed her the evidence, Elena's first reaction was not surprise, but anger. "I knew it," she said, pacing around the secure room where they had met. Everything about their approach screamed predator. They targeted the most vulnerable first, offered solutions that seemed too perfect, and isolated people from their support systems before making their move. Captain Webb spread out intelligence photos showing the true layout of the Kethvar facilities. "It gets worse. We've detected similar ships in orbit around at least 12 other star systems. This isn't their first harvest. They've been doing this for a long time, and they've gotten very good at it." Dr. Chin pulled up the decoded transmissions on her tablet. According to this data, they've successfully acquired labor forces from 47 different species. The humans they've processed so far are being classified as premium stock because of our adaptability and problem-solving skills. Elena studied the information, her mind already working on solutions. "We need to warn people, but if we do it wrong, it'll just cause panic and make things worse. The Kethvar will speed up their timeline if they think they've been exposed." Webb nodded grimly. "Plus, half the world's governments are so invested in the technology trade agreements that they might not believe us, or worse, they might decide the exchange is worth it." The three of them spent the next several hours developing a plan. They would need to move carefully, building a network of resistance while appearing to cooperate with the Kethvar operation. They would need evidence so undeniable that even the most hopeful world leaders would have to acknowledge the truth. But most importantly, they would need to understand their enemy. The Kethvar had clearly studied human behavior extensively, but their approach suggested they had fundamental misunderstandings about how humans responded to existential threats. "There's something they don't understand about us," Elena said as their meeting concluded. "They see our divisions, our conflicts, our problems, and they think that makes us weak or easy to manipulate." Dr. Chen looked at the data again, noting the clinical way the Kethvar had categorized human responses to their presence. They're treating this like a business transaction. Identify demand, provide supply, negotiate terms, complete delivery. Captain Webb smiled grimly. Then they've never seen what happens when humans stop negotiating and start fighting. Because the one thing I've learned in 23 years of military service is that you never, ever underestimate what people will do when they realize someone is trying to enslave them. As they left their secret meeting, each carrying copies of the evidence and plans for building their resistance network, none of them knew that Harvester Prime Zephlok was reviewing reports that described humans as surprisingly predictable and suitable for large-scale acquisition with minimal resistance expected. The Kethvar had studied human biology, psychology, and social structures, but they had missed the most important thing about humanity. The species that had survived ice ages, plagues, wars, and countless disasters was not going to quietly submit to becoming someone else's property. The invasion was about to become something the Kethvar had never encountered in their centuries of successful harvests, a war. The awakening fury of the resistance began not with grand declarations or military strikes, but with a network of quiet conversations in coffee shops, encrypted messages between research colleagues, and community meetings disguised as neighborhood barbecues. Dr. Sarah Chun, Captain Marcus Webb, and Elena Rodriguez had learned from studying the Kethvar approach. The most effective operations looked routine until it was too late to stop them. Elena's community organizing experience proved invaluable in building their network. She understood how to create communication chains that could spread information quickly while remaining invisible to outside observers. Within 2 weeks, their evidence had reached trusted contacts in 43 countries, and the picture that emerged from global intelligence gathering was even worse than they had initially understood. The Kethvar hadn't just been studying Earth for the few months since their arrival. Intercepted communications suggested they had been observing human civilization for nearly 50 years, carefully timing their approach to coincide with a period of global instability when their offer of help would seem most appealing. Captain Webb's military contacts provided the most disturbing intelligence. Satellite data showed that the 3 visible Kethvar ships were only the beginning. At least 27 additional vessels were positioned in orbit beyond Earth's detection capabilities, waiting to begin full-scale harvesting operations once the initial volunteer program had processed enough humans to understand optimal acquisition strategies. They're not just taking volunteers, Webb explained during a secure video conference with resistance cell leaders around the world. They're running tests. Every person who enters those processing centers is being analyzed for dozens of factors: genetic markers, psychological profiles, skill assessments, even social compliance indicators. Dr. Chun had managed to decode more of the Kethvar transmissions, revealing the true scope of their operation. The volunteer program is phase 1 of a 3-phase plan. Phase 2 involves negotiating with world governments for larger population transfers in exchange for advanced technology. Phase 3. She paused, looking at the data. Phase 3 is listed as direct acquisition of remaining optimal specimens. Elena felt sick as she processed the implications. They're planning to take people whether we agree or not. The volunteer program is just market research. The breakthrough that changed everything came from an unexpected source. Maria Santos, a janitor at one of the Kethvar processing facilities, had been recruited by Elena's network to observe and report on what she saw during her work. Maria had access to areas that official inspectors never visited, and what she discovered shattered any remaining illusions about Kethvar intentions. They have holding areas, Maria reported during a clandestine meeting in her apartment. Big rooms full of people who look like they're sleeping, but they're hooked up to machines. I counted at least 200 people in just the section I could access. Dr. Chen immediately understood the implications. They're not sending volunteers to other worlds. They're storing them here while they complete their evaluation process. Webb leaned forward grimly. How many processing facilities are there worldwide? The answer, when their network finished investigating, was terrifying. 17 facilities across 6 continents, each capable of holding thousands of people in suspended animation, while the Kethvar decided how to most profitably distribute their human inventory. But the discovery that galvanized the resistance came when Dr. Chin finally decoded the most heavily encrypted Kethvar communications. Hidden in the data streams were detailed records of their previous operations, including species profiles, acquisition statistics, and current market prices for different types of biological labor. The Althurians, an aquatic species, had been harvested for their ability to work in liquid environments. Current market price, 847 credits per individual. The Zealands, a species with enhanced pattern recognition abilities, were valued at 1,203 credits each for computational tasks. The Korith, with their natural ability to survive in low-gravity environments, commanded premium prices of 2,156 credits for asteroid mining operations. Humans, according to the Kethvar assessments, were projected to be worth 3,847 credits per individual due to their exceptional adaptability, problem-solving capability, and physical durability across diverse environmental conditions. "We're not people to them," Elena said, staring at the data. "We're merchandise with a price tag." The Resistance Network made a collective decision that night. They would expose the Kethvar operation globally, but they would do it in a way that prevented panic while maximizing human ability to respond effectively. They had learned from studying historical examples of successful resistance movements. Information warfare had to be accompanied by concrete action plans. Dr. Chin focused on developing technologies to counter Kethvar systems. Her team at the Smithsonian had been reverse engineering alien technology for weeks under the guise of academic cooperation, but now they began specifically looking for weaknesses they could exploit. Captain Webb coordinated with military contacts worldwide to develop response strategies that didn't rely on conventional warfare. The Kethvar ships were centuries ahead of Earth technology, but Webb had noticed something in their behavioral patterns that suggested they had never encountered organized military resistance from harvested species. Elena organized civilian networks that could coordinate mass resistance activities while providing support for people who had family members already in Kethvar custody. Her experience with community organizing had taught her that successful resistance required both strategic planning and emotional support for people facing impossible situations. The coordinated revelation came on a Thursday morning at precisely 9 a.m. Greenwich Mean Time. In a synchronized operation that the Kethvar monitoring systems initially missed, resistance cells around the world simultaneously broadcast the evidence they had gathered through every available communication channel. The reaction was immediate and powerful. Within hours, crowds had gathered outside Kethvar facilities worldwide. Government officials who had been promoting cooperation with the aliens found themselves facing populations that demanded immediate explanations. Most importantly, the flow of volunteers to Kethvar processing centers stopped completely. Harvester Prime Zeflok's response revealed how unprepared the Kethvar were for organized human resistance. Instead of adapting their strategy or attempting to address human concerns, they simply accelerated their timeline and moved to Phase 2 of their operation, formal negotiations with world governments for large-scale population transfers. The voluntary cooperation phase has concluded. Zeflok announced in a global broadcast, "We now invite your governmental leaders to discuss formal exchange agreements. Your species requires our assistance to address planetary challenges. We require access to human resources to meet galactic labor demands. This arrangement benefits all parties." But the Kethvar had fundamentally miscalculated human psychology. By revealing their true intentions, they had united humanity in a way that centuries of shared challenges had never achieved. The Resistance Network, that had begun with 3 people in secret meetings, now included millions of individuals across every continent coordinated through communication systems that the aliens couldn't monitor or control, the Doctor. Chen's team achieved their first major breakthrough when they successfully disrupted the energy systems of a Kethvar processing facility in Switzerland. The technology they used was ingeniously simple. They had identified the frequency harmonics that Kethvar systems used for internal coordination and developed devices that could generate interference patterns using modified human electronics. Their technology is incredibly advanced, Chen explained to the Global Resistance leadership during an encrypted conference call, but it's also highly integrated. They rely on quantum-entangled communication systems that can be disrupted if you can identify the right frequency patterns. Captain Webb coordinated the first military action against Kethvar forces when their security teams attempted to forcibly relocate refugees from a processing facility in Kenya. The battle lasted only 18 minutes, but it demonstrated something that shocked both humans and aliens. Kethvar troops were completely unprepared for combat against organized resistance. They've never had to fight, Webb reported after analyzing the engagement. Their weapons are designed for crowd control and individual intimidation. Their tactics assume compliance or, at most, disorganized panic. They have no protocols for dealing with coordinated military response. Elena's civilian networks proved equally effective at disrupting Kethvar operations through nonviolent resistance. Organized strikes shut down infrastructure around alien facilities. Mass demonstrations created logistical problems that the aliens couldn't solve without exposing the violent nature of their operation. Most effectively, information campaigns had convinced populations worldwide that cooperation with the Kethvar meant accepting slavery for themselves and their children. The turning point came when resistance forces successfully liberated one of the Kethvar processing facilities and discovered the full horror of the alien operation. The facility contained 3,247 humans in suspended animation, along with detailed records showing they had been sorted by physical capabilities, intellectual capacity, genetic markers, and psychological compliance levels. But the most shocking discovery was a communication array that had been monitoring every aspect of human civilization for decades. The Kethvar had detailed files on world leaders, military capabilities, social pressure points, and economic vulnerabilities. They had been preparing for this harvest longer than most humans had been alive. Elena stood in the facility's control room, looking at screens showing surveillance data on her own neighborhood, her own family. The Kethvar knew where her children went to school, what time she left for work, even which community meetings she attended. "They've been watching us our entire lives," she said to Dr. Chun and Captain Webb, who had arrived to help analyze the captured technology. "Planning this, waiting for the right moment to turn us into slaves." Dr. Chun was studying the facility's main computer systems, her fingers flying over interfaces that combined alien technology with captured human personnel data. "But they made a mistake," she said, a grim smile spreading across her face. "They studied our weaknesses, our divisions, our problems, but they never understood our strengths." Webb nodded, looking at intelligence reports showing similar liberation operations succeeding around the world. "They see our conflicts and think we can't work together. They see our diversity and think it makes us weak. They've been preparing to exploit a species that doesn't actually exist." The Kethvar response to losing their processing facilities was swift and revealed the true nature of their operation. Harvester Prime Zeflock abandoned all pretense of cooperation and issued what amounted to an ultimatum to Earth's governments. The voluntary cooperation phase has failed due to terrorist interference with lawful operations, his broadcast announced. "We are now implementing emergency acquisition protocols. Optimal specimens will be collected directly to fulfill existing galactic commerce contracts. Resistance will result in the classification of your species as hostile with corresponding reduction in acquired specimen value." Elena translated this for the Global Resistance Network. "They're going to start taking people by force, and if we fight back, they'll treat us worse when they sell us." But humanity's response was not fear or submission. It was something the Kethvar had never encountered in their centuries of successful harvests across the galaxy. It was fury. The price of underestimating humanity, the war that followed, was unlike anything the Kethvar had experienced in 300 years of galactic commerce. They had anticipated resistance, planned for it even, but their protocols were designed to handle the kind of opposition they had encountered before: scattered populations with limited technology, fighting defensively to protect specific territories or resources. They had not planned for species that would turn their entire planet into a weapons factory practically overnight, the Doctor. Sarah Chun found herself leading a global network of scientists and engineers who had collectively decided that alien technology was no longer alien once humans understood how to build it. The processing facility liberations had provided access to Kethvar equipment, and human reverse engineering capabilities proved far more advanced than the aliens had anticipated. The principle is actually elegant, Chen explained during a broadcast to resistance cells worldwide. Their weapons systems use focused energy patterns that we can replicate using modified industrial equipment. We can't match their efficiency, but we can build versions that work well enough. Within 6 weeks, human-built weapons capable of damaging Kethvar technology were being manufactured in facilities across 6 continents. The aliens had expected primitive projectile weapons and chemical explosives. Instead, they found themselves facing energy weapons that used principles they had taught humanity during the cooperation phase. Captain Marcus Webb discovered that his military experience fighting asymmetric warfare gave him significant advantages against an enemy that had only ever dealt with conventional resistance. The Kethvar military doctrine assumed that superior technology would quickly overwhelm any opposition, but Webb had spent years fighting opponents who used creativity and determination to overcome technological disadvantages. They fight like they're still conducting a business operation, he explained to a gathering of military leaders from 47 nations. They have procedures for everything, protocols to follow, proper chains of command. That makes them predictable. The first major engagement demonstrated the validity of Webb's analysis. When Kethvar forces attempted to secure a major population center in Brazil, they followed standard doctrine: deploy overwhelming force, establish control points, begin processing optimal specimens for harvest. Human forces responded with tactics that violated every assumption in Kethvar military planning. Instead of defending fixed positions, they used mobility and unpredictability. Instead of engaging in direct combat, they targeted supply lines and communication systems. Instead of trying to match alien technology, they used human psychology and creativity to turn the Kethvar's own advantages against them. Elena Rodriguez had become the coordinator for global civilian resistance networks, and her approach proved devastatingly effective. She had learned from decades of community organizing that the most powerful resistance came from people defending their homes and families, not from centralized military commands. Every neighborhood becomes a resistance cell, she broadcast through encrypted channels. Every family becomes an intelligence network. Every community becomes a fortress. The Kethvar found themselves facing opposition they couldn't classify or predict. Their technology could detect and neutralize traditional military forces, but it couldn't distinguish between a civilian going to work and a resistance fighter carrying improvised weapons. Their surveillance systems could monitor communication networks, but couldn't intercept the human networks that relied on personal relationships and shared community knowledge. Harvester Prime Zeflock made his first major strategic error when he decided to demonstrate Kethvar power by destroying a major city as an example to discourage further resistance. He chose Geneva, calculating that eliminating a center of international cooperation would fragment human opposition. Instead, the destruction of Geneva unified human resistance in a way that nothing else could have accomplished. Every person on Earth understood that the Kethvar were willing to murder millions to protect their profitable harvest operation, the Doctor. Chun was in her laboratory when the news reached her, and her reaction was immediate and decisive. No more defensive operations, she announced to the global resistance leadership. We're taking this fight to them. The human counterattack began with simultaneous strikes against Kethvar orbital facilities, using weapon systems that the aliens hadn't believed humans could develop so quickly. But the real shock came when human forces didn't just attack the alien ships, they captured them. Captain Webb had realized that the Kethvar's greatest weakness was their assumption that primitive species couldn't learn to use advanced technology. Human boarding teams trained on captured alien equipment were able to seize control of Kethvar vessels by exploiting security systems designed to prevent escape, not invasion. Their ships are designed like prisons, Webb explained after the first successful capture operation. Everything is focused on keeping people in, not keeping attackers out. Elena's civilian networks provided crucial intelligence that made these operations possible. Her community organizers had spent months mapping Kethvar facilities and identifying patterns in alien behavior. They knew which ships were used for what purposes when shift changes occurred, and how alien security systems responded to different types of alerts. The psychological impact of humans successfully capturing alien technology proved more significant than the military value. Kethvar forces had never faced an enemy that could turn their own weapons against them, and morale began to collapse across their operations. But the true turning point came when Dr. Chun successfully decoded the Kethvar's galactic communication systems and made a discovery that changed the entire nature of the conflict. They're not the only ones, she announced during an emergency broadcast to Resistance leadership. The Kethvar have been doing this to dozens of species across multiple star systems. And according to these communications, some of those species are still fighting. The message logs revealed a galactic network of enslaved populations that had been conducting their own resistance operations for decades. The Althurians had been sabotaging their underwater mining operations. The Zealans had been introducing errors into computational systems. The Korath had been organizing work slowdowns and equipment failures. Most importantly, several species had been waiting for an opportunity to coordinate their resistance with a species capable of direct military action against Kethvar forces. Elena immediately grasped the implications. We're not just fighting for Earth anymore. We're fighting to free every species they've enslaved. The Galactic Resistance Network that developed over the following months was something unprecedented in known history. Multiple intelligent species coordinating across interstellar distances to overthrow their common oppressors. The Kethvar had created the infrastructure for their own defeat by establishing communication networks that enslaved populations could access. Human military tactics, combined with intelligence from enslaved species who understood Kethvar operations intimately, proved devastatingly effective. The aliens found themselves fighting coordinated rebellions across 17 different star systems simultaneously, while their home systems faced sabotage from populations they had considered completely pacified. Captain Webb was coordinating a strike against the primary Kethvar command vessel when he received a message that would have seemed impossible 6 months earlier. It was from a Zealand resistance commander, transmitted through captured alien communication systems, offering tactical support for the assault. Colonel Webb, this is computational specialist Trendar of the Zealand Liberation Network. We have been monitoring your operations against the Harvesters. We can provide real-time intelligence about their command systems if you can provide covering fire for our sabotage teams. The final battle took place not in Earth's orbit, but in the Kethvar home system, as human fleets supported by rebels from a dozen enslaved species converged on the heart of the Galactic Commerce Network. Dr. Chun found herself aboard the bridge of a captured Kethvar dreadnought, using alien technology to coordinate attacks with allies she had never seen, but who shared humanity's determination to end the slave trade forever. Harvester Prime Zephlock's final transmission was broadcast across the galaxy as Kethvar facilities burned on dozens of worlds. This was a business operation, a legal commercial enterprise under galactic commerce law. These actions constitute illegal interference with authorized biological resource acquisition. Elena Rodriguez, now coordinating liberation efforts across multiple star systems, responded with words that would be remembered throughout galactic history. You're right about one thing. This is business, and business is closed. The collapse of the Kethvar collective was swift and complete. 3 centuries of accumulated wealth and infrastructure were redistributed to the species they had enslaved. Their homeworld became a monument to the victims of their operations, maintained by a coalition of liberated populations. But the most significant change was the establishment of the Free Species Alliance, a galactic organization dedicated to preventing any recurrence of systematic slavery. Earth became the Alliance's military headquarters, not because humans were the strongest species, but because they had demonstrated the most effective resistance to oppression. Dr. Chun, now serving as the Alliance's Director of Technology Liberation, often reflected on how the invasion had changed humanity's place in the galaxy. They came here looking for slaves, she would tell students at the Galactic University that had been established in the ruins of the primary HFY processing facility. Instead, they found liberators. Captain Webb, commanding the Alliance's rapid response fleets, had developed new military doctrines based on the lessons learned fighting the HFY. The most advanced technology means nothing if you can't adapt to unexpected tactics, he taught at the Alliance War College. And humans are very good at being unexpected. Elena Rodriguez had become something she never expected. A galactic leader coordinating community, organizing efforts across dozens of worlds. Her methods, developed in the neighborhoods of Los Angeles, proved universally effective at building resistance networks and supporting populations recovering from systematic oppression. Every species we liberate teaches us something new about resistance, she would say during Alliance conferences. But they all understand the same basic truth. Nobody has the right to own another person, no matter what species they belong to. The galaxy had learned a lesson that the HFY never understood. There is no profit margin high enough to justify slavery when your victims can fight back. And humanity had ensured that from now on every species in the galaxy would know how to fight back. The invasion that was supposed to turn humans into merchandise had instead turned humanity into the galaxy's immune system against oppression, and that, as it turned out, was a much more valuable contribution to galactic civilization than the HFY had ever imagined, that in the end, the aliens had gotten exactly what they deserved. Not slaves, but the species that would make sure slavery never again cast its shadow across the stars.